The market for portable handheld emulation devices such as the amazing Mio Mini Plus is a very busy one at the moment. So if anything's going to tempt me to buy something new, it's got to offer something a little different, like maybe, perhaps, a giant, beautiful, square screen. Hi and welcome back to the shed. I'm JOEBLEEPS and this is the Powkiddy RGB30. It's my latest impulse buy in a long line of impulse buys of portable handheld emulation devices. Now I usually buy these things, load them up full of games, play with them for a few days, maybe a week, and then ultimately they end up gathering dust when the next shiny toy comes along. That all changed with the Mio Mini Plus. I got this a few months ago and it's actually been my most played console this year, I think. I was playing it all summer. So I really thought I wasn't likely to be tempted by anything else anytime soon. And then I saw this thing. It's the Powkiddy RGB30. I've never had anything made by Powkiddy before, but I have been following their various releases. They all seem to fit into that same bracket alongside the Ergonomic and the Mio Mini and all of those other kind of devices. Now the reason this really appealed to me is that it's got this big square screen, and when I did a little bit of reading about it, it turns out that the screen itself is actually really good. What's more, it's a budget console. Buying this cost me less than £80 posted, including a carry case. So that was direct from the manufacturer and I'm pretty happy with how quickly it arrived as well. Now it might seem strange to have a square screen, and it is because it's extremely unusual, but when you think back to the sort of consoles that you might want to emulate on a handheld device like this, things like the Game Boy, the Game Gear, the Neo Geo Pocket, the Game Boy Color, all had not necessarily a square display, but certainly one that was closer to a square display than a widescreen display. So I had to try one, I ordered one, and now I have been pleasantly surprised. So I put together a little video, not necessarily to show you how to set it all up. There are much better guides out there and I'll link them in the description. However, I just wanted to show you that this exists and it's awesome. So I got very excited about the fact that this had a big square screen. I had dreams of perfect emulation of Neo Geo Pocket Color, of Game Boy Color, of Game Gear. That was what I was hoping for, but did it live up to the hype? Let's take a look. So what I've got in this case is something quite exciting. This is the Powkiddy RGB30. By the way, I bought the official case when I got the console and it's pretty good. It's a good snug fit, so snug it's quite difficult to get back out again, but it fits like the USB charging cable. I've put a cleaning cloth in there to keep the lens clean because it is a bit of a fingerprint magnet. But as far as cases go, it's good. It fits everything I need inside it. There's no branding or anything like that on the outside or on the zips or anything like that, but it's a hard shell. It's soft inside. It's no frills really, but it does the job well. I'm glad I got it. Now, onto the main point of having this video, which is the actual console itself. So this is the Powkiddy RGB30. I didn't really need this. The Mio Mini Plus is actually my favourite thing I bought all year. But if we look at these two side by side, and let's not forget, the screen on this thing is pretty huge, you know, compared to an original Game Boy. Now, you know, we're in my shed when I haven't even planned, but I've got a Game Boy within reach. If you look at the size of that screen compared to the original Game Boy screen, like, this thing is huge. But put it next to this and well, you can see it's a colossus. What's more, and what's the real selling factor for me, is that the display on this is actually square, which is really unusual. But when you look at the aspect ratio of a lot of vintage consoles, like the Game Boy for instance, it wasn't quite square, but it wasn't far from it. So when it comes to emulating particular consoles or styles of game, this is pretty good. So this console has 2 SD card slots, one for the operating system and one for the games. And when you buy it, you can buy it with an additional SD card. Now, a lot of advice warns not to get that because the games are strange choices and they're in a bit of a funny order. The quality of the cards isn't very good and so on. But if I'm honest with you, I wish I had done that, just because since I got it, it has been a little bit of a hassle to get sorted out. Like, I would rather have got it switched on and enjoyed playing it like I did when I got the Mio Mini. However, with this, my first couple of hours were spent trying to find and then format and then load up an SD card with various ROMs. I'm still having trouble getting the menus quite right, but the thing is, I know that that appeals to a lot of people, and most times I enjoy doing that as well. But yeah, so far that hasn't been the most fun. I think mainly because it's quite a niche console, quite a new release. There's not many guides. There's not really any pre-curated lists of games and consoles. But anyway, let's just do a quick load up of Alleyway, for instance. Okay, we'll start a new game, and you will see just why this appeals, because that screen is just huge. Like, as I say, this is big, but let's just make a quick comparison. So we'll come out of here with the Mio Mini, and we will go to Game Boy, and I'll load up Alleyway just so we can see those two side by side. So if I go to game, do love this machine, and I think I've got Alleyway on here. I haven't. Okay, let's load up a different game then. To exit the games on here, you simply press select and start at the same time, and then again to quit. Now I know I've got Atomic Punk on both, and that's an old favourite because I got that as a kid when I was on holiday in Germany and could never quite work out why that was called Atomic Punk, and it was essentially just Bomberman, but still. There are loads of options in terms of the display. You'll see that obviously this loaded up the game much quicker than the keep forgetting what it's called, the RGB30. But if you look at the difference in size on those two screens, it's night and day, and it is a nice, bright, bold contrast. I've spent quite a while. I kind of quite like the slightly muted tone. It doesn't really feel like a backlit screen on this one, whereas this is a bit brighter. However, there are loads of options. Like, even before you load it up, you can set up options, or when you've got it up and running, you can click these two at the same time, and there's lots of menus that you can come into there. But yeah, that screen is really something special, and the aspect ratio of it in particular is what makes it exciting. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let's just turn down the volume, which is weirdly, the plus is on this side and the minus is that side. So to turn it up, you press that one, and to turn it down, that way, which feels a bit back to front to me, but still. On top, you've got mini HDMI input, so you can play it and hook it up to your TV and play it on there. There is a power button, an R button, not entirely sure what that is, the volume controls, and then R1, R2, L1, L2. They feel like, when I first got it out of the box, I felt like a little bit of a shake to it, and I thought it was like the face buttons, but it's these, and there's a little bit of wiggle when it comes to those buttons. Now this is quite a cheap machine. Like, I bought it direct from Powkiddy. I bought it along with the carry case. I got it delivered, and it came to less than £80 for like the whole lot. So, you know, this is a really low cost item. Although the console's good enough, like, there are little touches that remind you you're not playing with a premium console, like that slight movement in there. But although it looks very plain, it's very comfortable to hold. There's a slight grip on these side bits here and here, which, having bought the white one, it looks really nice. Like, don't get me wrong, I love this in white. You can get it in navy blue, you can get it in black as well. The black looked a bit similar to my Ambernic that I've got, so I thought I'd go with the white. It's got that kind of Stormtrooper aesthetic. So where I got that new Evercade console, that gets really filthy really quickly. But with the smooth surface on most of this, it stayed quite clean. I've been playing it quite a bit, and it looks still like it did when it was new. On the bottom, we've got two USB inputs, one for on the go for like actual having a USB drive connected, and one for powering it, and then there's the headphone socket, and then the two SD card sockets, as I'd mentioned before. What we've also got, and what's quite novel for one of these things, normally like the old Game Boy, you've got one speaker on the front. There's forward facing stereo speakers, and they're pretty decent actually. When you're playing games, it's really noticeable having those games in stereo. Like, if you know from playing on the headphones, the Game Boy was always really good when it came to playing in stereo sound. It sounded fantastic through headphones. So all of these games running through those speakers, they sound pretty good. So if we just like turn it up for an instance here, I don't know if we'll hear it much. Obviously, I've got mono microphone and it's here, so it's not going to pick up any. It's not going to pick any stereo effect, but the sound from those speakers, I think it's all right. It's certainly good enough for me. But for now, so you can hear me speaking, I will turn it down. So as a console, it feels quite pleasant. Not quite as pocketable as the Mio Mini, and that's why I got a case. I regret not getting a case for this. I tend to keep it in a sock, a clean sock. Anyway. So yeah, the main reason for getting this was because purely it emulates a lot of my favourite old school games, which are the old handheld type games. It is brilliant for Game Boy. It is great for Game Gear. It's great for Game Boy Color. It's good for vertical scrolling shooters. So when I first did my video about this thing, I got a really good reaction to the fact that there is a shoot option built in on like the standard setup on the Mio Mini Plus. Which a lot of people might have missed if they upgraded straight to the Onion OS, but this is a really cool way of playing your games. It is set up so that you can control it this way, the D-pad works that way, but you do have to rotate it, okay? And then if you look at, let's see, what game are we on here? So that was on Fire Shark. So if I load up Fire Shark there, so I'll come out here, press against quit, go on to MAME, let's see if we've got Fire Shark in there. I'm pretty sure I have. So you can scroll through the menus a bit more quickly with the L and R buttons, and then D-pad to find exactly what you want. So if I go on Fire Shark there and load this one up, you'll get to see that with this one, like you rotate the screen, you get the full size of that on there. But with this, without having to actually rotate the screen, you've got about the same size display without any rotation. So this was really exciting. This looked great and was easy to see the games, but with this one you don't have to have any rotation. It's a really nice fit. Yes, you've got borders at the side, but I mean, if you look at that and you think about playing, that's a really good setup. If you're a fan of these scrolling shooter games, this is a really good option. Now, the one thing I think is a bit of a waste of time maybe is I would have preferred it to really embrace the old school and not have the analog sticks a little bit. But people I've spoken to, it's like you've got the opportunity to play things like you know, Mario Kart 64 and so on. You can play Dreamcast games on there as well, and a lot of those used an old CRT TV before widescreen TVs were in general use, so they can look pretty good on there too. Let's have a little look at one of those. So if we have a quick look at Mario Kart there, for instance, it's not bad, is it? Like that screen, although you have got the borders top and bottom, it's a pretty good fit. And the fact that it's square means it's so versatile. Depending on the games and consoles you're playing, you can generally fit whatever you want on there. Even the widescreen games look pretty good. Because the screen's massive, it is actually quite wide. Look at the width of that compared to the width of the Mio Mini. We're about the same. So it's like taking the Mio Mini Plus screen and then adding a bit more to the top and the bottom, and you can emulate lots of systems. There were two more systems that I was really excited about playing, so I'm going to just go to those first. First of all, Neo Geo Pocket Color, like that had a near square screen and it looks absolutely brilliant on here. One thing that's weird is that it seems to be geared up so that A button is B and B button is A for all of the emulators. I keep having to manually change that setting. But if you look at the size of that display, like it just fits perfectly, and you can play lots of different games on there, and they look really nice. The screen not only is a good size, but it's super clean, crisp, clear. This is on 50% brightness, and it is plenty to be able to see what you're looking at. I wouldn't be tempted to turn it up much more than that, firstly because I don't need it, but secondly it does seem to chew through the batteries a little bit quick, and that might be something I'll look into addressing later on and try and find maybe possibly a bigger battery if it ends up being an issue. But let's just have a quick go on Magical Drop. Should have just gone on a quick match. Here we go. So you can see how that looks. So the thing about the Neo Geo Pocket Color is I loved that console, but the games now very, very expensive to track down. They were pretty expensive at the time. There was no backlight. Yes, you can backlight the screen, but I mean, with this as an alternative, I love it. It's really great. I just wish that instead of the analog stick, we had a little clicky stick, just like the classic console. That'd be great. Anyway, let's have a look at Sega Game Gear. So the aspect ratio of the Game Gear, again, very, very similar to the Game Boy. It takes up almost all of this screen, and it's, you know, if you're like me and your eyesight is going, a bigger screen like this to enjoy games you used to like when you were younger and were able to see on a much smaller, dimmer screen, you know, it's definitely a plus. So you can see these games in all their glory as well, like the pixel detail and everything else looks great. Not an expert on this one. I like the D-pad. The D-pad and the buttons feel pretty good, you know. I'm not so keen on those, and they're a bit further down. You have to kind of hold it further down there, but it is playable, and I like that at least it's prioritized the D-pad. Like the natural feel is that you use in the D-pad. There's like enough of a response from the buttons when you're pressing them, but they kind of feel like they rattle a little bit in there. But if we compare it to the Mio Mini, that's much more solid. But you know, one of the reasons why I'm doing this video, and I'm not going into loads of detail about setting up and everything else, because there are much better videos out there. I just wanted to show you that this thing exists and it's got this amazing screen. But what I'm also doing is I'm thinking about possible mods. Like I'm thinking of taking it apart and seeing if there's a way of me getting these buttons to feel a little bit more premium, if there's anything I can do about that. And if you've got any other ideas of things you'd like me to try or look for when I'm opening it up, then let me know in the comments and we'll see how we go. I think the console that possibly looks the best on here is the Game Boy Color. It's just, you know, it's like it's made for it. The aspect ratio is very, very close. The colors look great. It's nice and crisp. And if you don't like the particular palette or brightness or anything else, there are tons of settings in the menu. I'll show you in a minute. But I mean, look at that. I don't even need to argue the case for it, do I? It just looks great, and it takes up so much of the console is screen. Now I know they could have made it in the same sort of format as the Game Boy, like with the controls below, but you know what? I'm actually enjoying the comfort of playing with the hands by the side. It doesn't have that kind of strain on the wrists after a while because you're constantly supporting that extra weight. It feels just like your hands just sit in the right place. It doesn't even look like a very ergonomic design, does it? You know, it's completely flat and smooth on the back. There's these little bits of grip on the sides here, and the front's pretty flat as well. But when it comes to actually holding it, it's much more comfortable and ergonomic than it initially appears to be. So I would say that's been the biggest surprise for me. I was excited about the screen, but I didn't think it was going to be quite so comfortable to hold and to use. And even like the headphone jack being right in the middle, like it's been thought through in terms of how you're going to be able to use it. You might cover the speakers a little bit if you're using the analog sticks, but generally, like, your hands don't even sit in front of that a lot of the time. Like, and the Mio Mini is a big pain for that because the little tiny speaker is there, and when you're playing, your thumb's constantly in the way of it. So with this, the design is better than I thought it was going to be, and the buttons and D-pad are good. As I say, shoulder buttons are a little bit rattly, but it's great. Now I'm going to come out of this game to the menu. When you're on this screen, if you press select, it brings up the quick access menu, and there's lots of different things that you can do in there for shutting down, restarting, and so on. And if you press start, it brings up the main menu, and there's lots and lots of things that you can do in there. First thing I did was got it online because yes, it's got built-in Wi-Fi, and you can update it as well. So the first thing I did, and it's great because I didn't even have to open a computer, I switched it on, I got it online, I updated it to the latest firmware. It runs on JELOS, JELOS, and that is supported officially. So the latest version of that is great. I've had no real problems with it at all so far. I've yet to get to learn it. You can have scrapers for your box art, and there's all sorts of settings and so on that you can go through that I'm not going to go through in this video, but just let you know it's quite easy to access those menus when you need them. Right, are there any other games and things I wanted to show you? I mean, even this little front end interface is quite nice, isn't it? The NES does look good. Let's just have a quick go on. Let's pick a random game. Scroll, and we're looking at Adventure Island. Okay. Now I changed the aspect ratio as per the recommendations in Retro Game Core's video because a lot of NES games didn't really have much going on the sides there, so it expands it very, very slightly. And it looks good, doesn't it? You know, it takes up a lot of the screen. Very similar to the look of the Game Gear in terms of the amount of game that's on the screen. And again, the colour and the crispness of the display. Like the pixels look pixel perfect. I know it's scaled slightly, maybe. I don't know. I'm not an expert on the details with all these things, but all I can tell you is it looks really good. I'll come back to this game at a later date. It's not got the advantages of things like the Mio Mini where you can dip in and out of different games and it remembers what you last played and it automatically saves states. I've got to learn a little bit more about all of that. Now, the last thing I want to show you is what I'm really, really excited about. And the main reason why it is worth getting one of these, even if you already own one or many things like this. And that is when we come to Pico 8. Okay, now Pico 8 is like an indie platform, largely computer-based, which you can have on Linux, you can have it on Mac, you can have it on Windows. And it is a sort of online-based indie community. You can design, publish your own games. And it's got this little interface called Explore. There are loads and loads of little indie games that are just perfect for me, and they all display on a square screen. So as a console, like even if you had this just as a machine for Pico 8, it would be a great machine. Okay, you can go through and scroll through all sorts of different games. Okay, that'll let you know what are the latest games that you can go, and you can just open up and play whichever ones you want. I have paid for this, so you kind of pay for access to Pico 8. So I did that online, and that was like $15, and it is worth every penny. There's lots and lots of different games to choose from. You can look at work in progress. You can find all sorts of different things. You can have a lucky draw and just find any other random game. You can search for games, and I've already been having a great time with lots of different stuff. This one here, Matchy Matchy, is my current favorite. Okay, so with that one, reminds me a little bit of Zookeeper on the DS. But if we just load up the puzzle I'm up to at the moment, it's a simple case of you have to match up different animal faces by going in a blank space that is between two matching. So we've got the frog and the frog there, so I'll press and it'll bring those together. Now I get access to those two frogs, so I can bring those together. Now it's easy for me to get to the two chickens, and so on, and you work your way through. So if I do those two, then it'll take 3 foxes, and I've got 6 overall, so I'll have to be strategic with that. So instead I'll do the frog there, I'll do the frog there, I'll take those 2 foxes, then I can get those 2 foxes, then I can get those, and so on. This is just my kind of game. It's just perfectly addictive, and within Pico 8 there are so many awesome games. It's a wonderful platform, and to have that built in to a little handheld like this is just the icing on the cake for something that is really just so much better than it has any right to be. It's a budget console. As I say, cost me less than £80 to get the whole thing delivered with the case, and I am really happy with it. I was expecting it to feel a little bit cheap, but because it is cheap, it's kind of, you can forgive it, but the thing that you're looking at most of the time while you're playing is the screen, and the screen is the system seller, isn't it? So I would say if you are even slightly interested in indie games and you like the look of Pico 8 and you're better at playing them than I am, then even for just that, this console is fantastic. But the fact that you can play all these retro games, the fact that it's so well suited to a particular corner of the market in terms of Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Gear, Neo Geo Pocket, and it's on a handheld, it's just a perfect home for it, isn't it? I'd say I'm really happy with this. I didn't want to do a big long tutorial. I just wanted to show you, and just show you that it's a cool little thing that you can get if you hadn't heard of it before. I apologise to your bank balance. I am going to do some follow-up videos if I've explored it a little bit more, found out something interesting that you can do with it, found out any mods that maybe aren't covered in other videos. But if there is more you want to know, let me know, and I'll cover them in a future video. And that is it for now. I'm off to go and play a few more of these awesome little games. I'm not an expert on these things. There are much better videos out there that will give you some excellent guides on how to set these things up. In fact, I needed to look at those myself because I'm no expert in that sense. But in terms of playing on it, I have been really, really enjoying it. Pico 8 is something that's been a real surprise to me. I love those kind of little indie games. I enjoyed playing those on the Evercade when they do the Indie Heroes collections. And to have something like that that's almost like a Netflix scrollable system of seemingly infinite games that you can choose from that all have a certain charm and all have that kind of pick up and play appeal, that has made it an even better console than I expected. So in terms of, it's fairly low cost. If you've got the budget to justify it, I'd say go for it. Now, although I'm not really an expert on the software side of things with setting this kind of console up, and there are better people out there to guide you on that, I am quite into doing my hardware mods. And I'm quite looking forward to taking this thing apart, having a look inside and seeing what sort of opportunities I've got to further improve what is already a pretty awesome console. Now, if you're into modding or you're looking at getting into hardware modding, you should definitely check out ZedLabz. They sell all sorts of stuff to help you with that hobby. And if you use my link in the description, you'll be supporting my channel at no extra cost to you. Also, if you use the code JOEBLEEPS, you get a bit of money off your order, which is nice. And that's it for now. I'm off to go and spend a bit of time playing on my new console. And this is JOEBLEEPS signing off from the shed. If you want to keep watching me, there's some more videos popping up here. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.